Let's come to Chima Christian and put just the same question to you. What are you thinking about this period that the students have been out of school and the face-off continues? It's increasingly looking like who's going to blink first?
Before the month's interregnum, where you're talking about negotiations between the ASUU and the federal government, you had COVID-19. And the double catastrophe with Nigerian's version of COVID-19 is that students in other climes where you had digital access penetrated into the society were having online classes. Universities began to find ways to reach their students even while they were doing the lockdown. Nigeria didn't have that access except for few private universities. So students were completely shut down. And after that, it was no making of the federal government, it was no making of the ASUU, it was also no making of the students. It was just an international catastrophe. And when you came out of COVID-19, countries rushed back to work. He was talking about catch-up. Students were rushed to catch up. Lecturers were rushed. And then after that, you jumped right into ASUU strike. And so if you look at it from the perspective of a student, you see what it has done to their mental health. Because for some students who were just admitted in the nick of 2019, they've never been to a proper university class. They are now told that they should be in year 3, but they've never done one day of proper classes. And now they have 1 year to go. And we are going to rush them out and look at the quality we are producing from Nigeria University. And so that is one part of the thing, and that's not even my concern. My concern is that we are wasting these 5 months discussing unimportant issues. Because as far as I'm concerned, the conversation between ASUU and the federal government is not about UTAS, it's not about IPPS, it's not about earned academic allowance.
Really?
Yes. The discussion that needs to be had is the future of education financing in Nigeria. It has come to that point where it's obvious to critical thinkers that the federal government cannot continue to run our education system the way it is. For most civilized climes, you have the government pay attention to basic education, primary school and senior secondary school, the way we call it here. That's where you lay the foundation for basic literacy. That's where you lay the foundation for basic numeracy. And then in modern times, that's where you also lay the foundation for digital literacy, basics. And then when you've laid that foundation that the person can interact, the person can count money, the person can live freely, can appreciate issues in a wider society, then you've given that person the basics. University education, and this is where Nigeria gets it wrong, because you are trying to mass produce university students and it cannot work. Because even in civilized climes, how many percentage of workforce in China are university educated? What is the percentage of the workforce in Germany, which is by the way an egalitarian society, are university educated? Why do you need a university education to be a bricklayer? Why do you need a university education to struggle for 4 years, take a lot of bed spaces, take a lot of opportunities, take a lot of money from the system, and then you end up being a driver? And we know that Nigeria have continuously produced university graduates who end up being drivers. And I'm not saying that drivers or bricklayers are demeaning jobs. I am saying that the technical competence required to do certain things do not require you to go to school, to university. So once you have basic education sorted out, federal government should not be in the business of heavily subsidizing university education. And that's the important conversation that the federal government needs to sit down with ASUU to say, we are developing a 10-year plan of transitioning from 100% funding of university education in Nigeria to say 30% funding. And then universities will have to develop modalities. This will not happen overnight, but I see in Nigeria going forward, because what you keep happening is that after 2 weeks they might come to the table and make one form of agreement or the other, but in the next 6 or 7 months, maximum 1 year. Because if you trace the history of this ASUU strike, it started even before 2009. The earliest I got as I was preparing for this program is 1970 something. So you keep having, and there is no, for those of us in my generation, there has never been any 2-year cycle. People of my age has never had of an ASUU strike. Never been. So a lot of young Nigerians in their numbers has never seen Nigerian universities work for a complete 4-year cycle. And That's a big problem. And we know that this problem is not the making of the federal government, because this is now becoming successive governments have tried. Because if you say that this government is bad, what of the previous ones? Successive governments, both military governments, in democracies from 1999, several administrations. The problem we are not addressing is that the government cannot heavily subsidize university education. What the government should do is to provide basic education, primary and secondary school, and then parents or students who want to offer or go for technical courses can now pay. In working universities, students pay high tuition. Here in Nigeria, we try to pay for the students, right? Because the cost of producing a university graduate, say engineering in Nigeria, is cheaper than cost of producing the same engineering student in China or in the United States. And then you look at the quality. A university-trained Nigerian engineer, a university-trained Chinese engineer, a university-trained Finnish or even a German engineer are they of the same quality. So in our efforts to carry more than we can, we have watered down the system, and that's why we come back every 4 months, 5 months, 6 years, or 1 year to discuss ASUU issue. Until the government discusses that funding plan, then this conversation will continue even into the next government.
Now we're looking at some of the issues that are at stake here, and there's this matter of a payment platform where ASUU insists that it must have its own payment platform, UTAS, turning down the IPPIS, which a majority of federal government employees are on. And the question has also been asked, where does an employee determine the platform on which they get paid by the employer? And that's another bit about it. There's also the controversy over the integrity of the system. ASUU insists that what they have developed is better than the IPPIS. Well, we also have reports that that system also failed an integrity test by NIDA. Then, of course, others outside ASUU have said, look, even if you accept UTAS, we are not going to accept that. Let the lecturers alone. We have our own platform. And now, what if everyone asks for a platform? I mean, perhaps
NTA staff will ask for their platforms too.
Exactly. So, where is that leading us?
Well, you don't want to open a can of worms, and then you don't want to open those things. But when people talk to me, what I look beyond is the exact words they say. I peel off those conversations and track back and say, you know, when you have conversation about UTAS and IPPIS, what I hear is that I don't trust the government. The employees are saying, I don't trust my employer. So trust is the critical issue that has broken down. And that's why the lecturers don't have confidence in the payment platform. The government also does not have confidence in the alternate payment platform designed. So where you have an atmosphere of mutual distrust, that tells you also why the conversations have lingered without any outcome in sight. And without this trust, because if a government has continuously broken its promises, and not just this government, successive governments, because as at the time they entered those promises, there is no capacity to implement them. Because when you look at what is the motivation of a politician, he has a 4-year tenure. If he does well, he'll be elected for another 4-year tenure. And you're asking him for questions. Look at now where several months into the election, the government does not want to look bad. The government does not want to look unpopular. So sometimes you reluctantly cede for the public appearance of it what you know you cannot implement.
But then on the part of the other side too, knowing that what you're getting into is improbable, why do you insist?
Why do you insist? Because university must be funded properly. Look, I understand ASUU. In fact, it is only on this strike that they are debating UTAS, IPPIS, and their salary. In other strikes, they are debating more than that. They are debating for more funding for education, right? You see, you cannot have a university or a thinking in Nigeria where the government seems to be responding to university education demands by mass producing or mass admitting or mass minting of university undergraduates who have comparatively little to no real life skills or hands-on skills. And that's what the lecturers are looking at and are crying. That you are not paying us, we cannot function. The university system is not functioning. You need to go to a university these days. For a class that is designed for 40, you see that class sitting 250 students with no public address system. Although you can say you can make the same argument for Nigerian correctional facility, you can make the same argument for Nigerian healthcare system, you can make the same argument for transport system, where a road that is supposed to take 500 vehicles is taking 3,000 vehicles, and every evening you have. So you can make the same argument. But the thing is that university system is collapsing, and the main thing is that it must be funded. The question we should now ask is who will fund it? That brings back to the first argument. You see, because I admit and I understand the role of education in lifting people out of poverty. But the basic line is this, that what do you intend to get out of education? Teachers will tell you it's 3 R's. They say it's reading, it's arithmetic, and I think it's writing. Once you possess, and then the fourth essential is reasoning. Once you pass through an efficient primary school system, if you pass through an efficient secondary school system, you should have this. But even the university system that we are fighting and killing each other over, you still pass your primary school, your secondary school, your university education, you still don't have the 4. You see a lot of university graduates and students cannot write properly, cannot speak properly, cannot reason properly, don't have life-saving skills. And then again, you track back. The era of thinking with the university system is that, oh, let us produce students or graduates who will go and look for jobs. Those jobs are no longer there. And if you read World Bank reports, they say they report the workplace of the future. It's no longer the workplace where you have a big conglomerate and you have thousands and thousands of workers. It is now SME dependent. Some of the leading SMEs today, you don't need university education to run them. You don't need university education. If you have a good primary and secondary education, you don't need university education to be a baker. You don't need university education to do my dress, except if you're going into technical. And then there are jobs that would require technical competencies, and that's where you have professions who are, that's how, because it's a pyramid. You have the base, give them the basic, let everybody start from the same slate, give them the ability to read, ability to write, ability to reason. If you give them the basic, then people, water will begin to find their level. People who have inclination in sports will move to sports. People who want cooking will go to cooking. You don't need a PhD to cook or to run a restaurant. You don't need that. But you might need a PhD to become a nutritionist, right? So you choose where you want to. But the insistence on rushing everybody to the top, and in effect, you are neglecting primary education, you are neglecting secondary education, and once you have defective primary, defective secondary, the people you are pushing into the university does not have the basic to even take what they are going to be given. And then you must, so we are in an educational loop. We are training people for jobs that no longer exist, and we have a different model for looking at it. I'll end with this point. There are alternatives for young people, and I'm glad that fellow young people are taking that. The advent of internet technology has provided ample opportunity, not for all Nigerians now, because I understand there are a lot of Nigerians living where there are no access to the internet. But for some of us, and for some people who have access to internet, there are several courses you can, like, what do you hear about students? Are people talking about coding, web design, UI UX design, app design, and all those opportunities that exist in the digital ecosystem? You don't need university degrees to learn the skills. In fact, you can go to university and stay for 4 years and come out no skill. But there are platforms that offer you 4 weeks courses, 8 weeks courses, short courses, and the alternative, if you are not talking about this, is where you can go and learn carpentry, learn this thing. And I listened to Dr. a colleague in the other studio talk about technical education. There are fabrics, metal workers. You need to have technical education. You don't have to spend 4 years to learn these things. These are skills you can learn for 4 years, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 1 year. Why do you have to put people through university for 4 years to learn things that they can learn in 8 weeks, and then you cannot fund it?
All right. We'll take a break here at this point, and when we return, there'll be more on the prolonged ASUU strike. And the lines will be open, which means you can get to join the discussion in the studio. So stay with us on NT Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly. Thank you very much, Ben, calling in. Yeah, well, there are so many arguments, but some of them sometimes you have to interrogate further. Or would it be just that people at the helm do not appreciate education? We've seen people at the helm who are former university teachers themselves, who are members of ASUU, and yet they failed to reach agreements with their own colleagues. Does that argument, does it hold water?
Well, to me, it doesn't, because when you get in there, for instance, even the current ASUU chairman, take him from the ASUU chairman and make him the Minister of Labour and Productivity, his side to the story will change. Because when you get into there, you begin to see the enormous responsibility of what is called government. Because at the time you are making demands, security people are making demands, education is making demands, infrastructure, you have a whole lot of making similar demands at the same time. It now comes down to priority. What do you prioritize? And then each one is making pressing demands and even willing to go on strike for 7 months to press home their demands. Yet you don't have the resources to attend to them. So it's a matter of what you see is as a result of where you sit.
Well, 2 weeks. Like Dr. Mahmoud Osman said, it's like tomorrow. It'll pass so quickly. Can we look forward to something coming out of this 2 weeks with everyone involved? ASUU, the government side, including the Secretary to Government of the Federation, the Minister of Education, and the Ministry of Labour and Employment.
Given what we know about these governments, I am fairly confident that they will address and get the teachers to get back to classroom in that time frame or slightly after that. That's number one. But what I look at it is that you're just merely putting bandage on the injury. You are merely addressing the symptoms. You are merely kicking the can further down the road. And because when I say government should not take on the 100% responsibility or nearly 95% responsibility in training our university undergraduates, so next logical question should be, who is responsible for paying for university education? Since if we had all your money, the government can say, oh, we're paying for all the students in Nigeria who want to get into university. Go read any course of your choice, we're paying. All you have to do is to bring a token and then we'll match the rest. Today, those funds are no longer there. So who should pay for university education? Now, to find this answer, it is not my own answer. You go and look at where are university systems working well. Go and find the countries, whether in Southeast Asia, whether in Europe, whether in America, where are university systems working well? And who are the people paying for those universities to work well? And there you find your answer. And for the most part of it, it is the students and their benefactors who pay for their university education. A lot of people would argue
now and say things are so tight, so difficult, that the burden of an average parent is so high that further inflicting the cost of education of their children in words is it's something that you shouldn't even consider in the first place. Now, how would you respond to that?
I'm a pragmatist, I'm a realist, and this will not be so palatable to socialists or people who believe in, but again, I understand, and that's why you don't have to you have to phase out your implementation of this.
Okay.
You can say, for instance, school fees adjusted by inflation should ordinarily increase. Adjusted by inflation. Yeah. Adjusted by inflation, because the cost of running those universities are increasing. Yes, you can say Nigeria is a civil service dependent society, but that's that. Now, but there should be phased. For instance, we can say every 5 years or every 3 years, there should be a 25% increment in school fees, tuition fees of students, until you get to a point where these university systems can run comfortably on a minimal government subvention. And that's where, but this is not something you can just implement immediately. This is something that you have to sit down, analyze and plan, and set the plan in motion. Because while our parents or school children or school students listening to me say, why will I pay for my university education? Why is the government not paying? And the same question is the question you ask us. For instance, when you have a child, from age 0 to toddler, you take care of the child. In this case, the federal government is the father, the benevolent father. But at a certain point, you say, child, I love you, but you have to learn how to walk on your feet. Read. I've taught you how to write. I've taught you how to reason. You know your arithmetics. I've taught you how to count. Anything you want to do extra with this basic I've given you, you have to find a way around it.
Okay. Well, let me track back a bit to speak to some of the two callers who expressed frustration at the seeming level of insensitivity from our leaders, some of them, not all. Because what you do see is that when one of them commits, in quotes, a crime, the crime is generally attributed to all of them. The students down here have been sitting practically wasting away for some months. And then you as a person run by public funds, jet out, go and celebrate with your kids, and it is them that put out the pictures. Even if your kids are graduating abroad, it is true that it's a small celebration. But why can't you celebrate it quietly? Why will you be making loud noise where you know that your neighbor is, So I think that some of our leaders should approach this issue to see the level of frustration and anger in the land and begin to manage the optics of the way they move around, the way they deal, and those things will taper down some of the comments you're beginning to feel from the public.
Interestingly, you also have people who otherwise are struggling, if I might use that term, but they also send their children to schools abroad and they celebrate too. Exactly.
But they are not run up by public funds. If you are sustained by public funds, the public views you differently, especially when they know that you may or may not be directly responsible for the predicament. Or that you have the responsibility at least to solve it.
Okay. Well,
UTAS should be off the table. What could be offered is an improvement on IPPS. That should be the negotiation. That should be the concession. UTAS off limits. What are the pain points with this particular payment platform? Let us address the pain points. Then the money and the financial side of it, look, we are going to meet you 35% of the way, 45% of the way, right? And we're giving you this now. We could talk about this in the next 6 months. Let us see if our finances will improve, and then these tutors off the way. But we can assure you we can improve on this. That is the short-term and immediate thing I expect that these two parties are able to come and agree on. In the future, we'll begin to plan. How can universities self-sustain? How can they plug into their alumni network to mobilize resources to fund part of their activities? How can they approach philanthropists to make endowments into public universities? How can universities transition from research work to industrialization, where there could be partnership between universities and the private sector, where you have exchange of ideas in terms of exchange of value for those ideas? Then how can you talk about alternate sources, funding models for the university? Can students, if for instance, departments go into production of things like bakery that can serve the immediate community, that can mobilize, resources for the university? You can look at 9 to 10 different revenue sources for the university, and then the endowment or the support from the government will come in. What you have now is the government is bearing the responsibility of paying for an overgrown child. Government is paying prices. You've trained this child through primary school, you've bought pampers for the child, you've gone to secondary school for the child, you married wife for the child, you are feeding the child, and you are feeding the grandchildren of your own child. So government cannot continue to take responsibility in perpetuity. It has to stop at some point. What you give at some point to your children is fatherly advice, and not continue to pay for them even when they are of age.
all right. Thank you so much, and Sandra, your closing comments.